Today's video is unfinished business, so I thought I would dress business casual. Actually, I just came home from work, so this is what you get. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Just Another Struggling Writer, the beleaguered author's one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Today's video is about unfinished business, an unfinished series audit, if you will. I am actually the kind of reader that likes taking breaks in between series entries. If I stay too long in a world, I just get kind of bored with it and kind of feel tired of it and want to move on. And that tends to make me enjoy the subsequent entries less and less and less as I go on. So I have found that taking a long break makes me appreciate the later entries more, as I am excited to get back into that world. I know a lot of readers like to binge series and they wait specifically for series to be completed before they read them all at once. That is not me. I like the publication schedule because it gives me time to get away from all that and kind of miss it a little bit and feel excited to get back into it. That also means I don't reread a lot right before I get back into a series, just because of that, wanting to feel excited and interested in the setting again. And though that does mean that I sometimes forget details here and there, it also means that I have started and left incomplete quite a bit of series. I'm a fantasy reader and lover, and so a lot of the books that I pick up are just the first installment of 3 or 4 or 9 books. If you've watched my New Year's reading resolutions video, you know that I want to rectify that a little bit going into this year and actively seek out second and third and later installments of series that I haven't completed yet. This is partially just because I can't leave myself hanging forever, and also because I want to get that monkey off my back. There are some series that I proclaim to love, but I've actually only read the first or maybe the first 2 books in the series. I haven't finished them yet. And the reason I haven't finished them is just because I don't want it to be over, or I'm afraid that the later installments will disappoint me, or I just am waiting for the right time. And well, I'm making now the right time. But first, I needed to kind of take a look at my TBR, take a look at my library, and put together a list of all of the series that I have started. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order here because I tried doing it by the order that I read the first installment or that I first started reading it, and some of them it's been literally like 4, 5, 6 years, and I just couldn't remember which ones I had read and in what order. So we're just going to go in alphabetical order. So the first series on this list is Amina al-Sirafi, the first entry of which is, of course, The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, which came out just last year. And I really, really love that book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a boatload of fun. And at the time, I didn't realize that it was the beginning of a new series. I actually thought it was a standalone with series potential. Come to find out after I had made my review of it that yes, it is intended to be a series, and I am so excited to get back into it. The only downside is there's no anticipated release date for whatever the next installment will be. This one just came out last year, so it's going to be a minute before I can get back into this world. But again, that doesn't really bother me that much. So the second series on this list is the Between Earth and Sky series by Rebecca Roanhorse, the first of which is Black Sun. I read Black Sun about a year ago, and I had some issues with certain elements of the plot and certain POV characters, and I had a lot of critiques. And if you read or listened to my review of that book, you would think that I really didn't like it, but I actually did. I really loved the writing. I really loved the setting. I loved some of the characters, and there was just so much there that I really, really did enjoy. It's just that when it came time to sit down and parse my feelings out, the things I didn't like kind of overpowered me a little bit. They were just more glaring than the things that I did like. I still gave it 4 stars because, again, the writing, the setting, and the 2 of the primary characters were just so great that the elements I didn't like weren't enough to bring it down. That being said, initially I hadn't planned on reading the second book of this series because it seemed like one of the characters I really did not like. I suspected that he was going to have a more primary role in the next book, and I wasn't really excited about that. But I gave it some thought, and I think I was probably being a little bit too harsh, and that's no reason to hold myself back from what could potentially be a really, really good series. Again, I gave the first one 4 stars. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push through with Fevered Star. Fevered Star is already out, and then the 3rd installment is slated to come out later this year. I feel like now is a good time to pick up Fevered Star sometime here in the spring, and then maybe in another year I'll get back to the 3rd installment. So the 3rd series on this list is called Book of the Ancestor by Mark Lawrence, the first of which is Red Sister. And when I first read Red Sister, I felt my brain chemistry changing. Literally, there are lines and sentences in this book that I feel like changed my life and changed my outlook on things. I just loved it so much. And again, you would think that meant that I would get right into the next one, but I didn't. It was one of those cases where I loved it so much, I was worried that the second one wouldn't hold up to the original, and I just couldn't bring myself to get back into it. It was just like, it was so precious to me that I feel like any kind of changes to my perception of it would ruin it, which is stupid, I know. I've actually bought the 2nd and 3rd installments. I am intending on reading them later this year, and I'm just gonna have to get over that fear of disappointment. The 4th series on this list is actually a new entry on this list because I just read the first book last week. And it is another Mark Lawrence series set in the same world as the Book of the Ancestor. And this series is called Book of the Ice. And I didn't love it as much as Red Sister. The first one is called The Girl in the Stars. I did like it. Again, I just love Mark Lawrence's writing so much that it's able to pull me along on whatever story he's telling. So this one is a YA, and I don't really jive with YA as much, and the story just wasn't as compelling. That being said, the writing is still really good, and I just love the world that the story is set in so much. The setting just is really beautiful to me that even though I didn't love it as much, I gave it 3.5 stars, I think. I'm still going to continue on with the series because I just want all the context and everything about this world that I can get. All right, number 5 is another new entry on this list because I just finished this book 2 days ago, and that is the Fallen Gods series by Hannah Kaner, the first of which is God Killer, another book that came out just last year. I have a lot of feelings on this book. I can't decide if I'm going to do a full review on it or not, or if I'll just talk about it at length during my monthly reading wrap up, but I really liked this setting. I have complicated feelings about the characters, but in good ways, in positive ways that make me really compelled to pick up the second one, which is supposed to come out later this year. This is a really good book. I've seen a lot of YouTubers talk about it, and the hype is, I feel, warranted in certain ways. Again, I think I'm going to talk about this in a separate video, but this is a great first installment to a series, and I'm really excited for the second one to come out. So next up on this list, we have Queen of the Tearling by Erika Johansen, and this is another completed series that I read the first one at what just felt like the right time. It wasn't really groundbreaking. It wasn't like excellent. It didn't like rearrange my atoms in the same way that Red Sister did, but I just loved it anyway. It just swept me along, and it was just a really interesting, fun little read. And the end of that book was super like, I've got to read the second one. But for some reason, again, I just haven't. I know I immediately bought it after I finished the first one. And then again, it's just, I just haven't gotten to it. And this is one that I read years ago, multiple years, well before the pandemic. And so it is definitely time to get back into that one. And I just bought that really beautiful edition of the first book, and I'm on the lookout for the next 2 editions. So that is Queen of the Tearling by Erika Johansen. So next up is the Six of Crows duology, and I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't really love Six of Crows. I'm not a big YA fan, and I wasn't a huge fan of the way that Leigh Bardugo narrated this story. I did not love the retrospective look on certain events that led the characters to where they are. I felt like it was a real killer of momentum about things that I really didn't care about. I didn't like the main ship. I felt like Kaz was a male Mary Sue character who could do no wrong and was great at everything, and it didn't make any sense for him to be 16 or 17 or whatever. And it just felt like their ages were cosmetic for what they were achieving and what they were doing and their station in life. Leigh Bardugo can write her ass off, that's for sure, and I can see the appeal for other readers, but it was not for me. And that was one of those books where it took me 3 or 4 tries to finish, because within the first couple of chapters I just knew that the YA tone was not for me. However, it's so ubiquitous in the fantasy genre that I couldn't not finish it. So I eventually pushed my way through. As I was getting up into the end, I was like convinced that I wasn't going to complete the duology, and then the ending happened. And my favorite character got you-know-whatted, and I was like, well, now I have to read the second one. I don't care about literally anyone else but this one character, and I have to see what happens to them. So I feel like I got hornswoggled a little bit. So I will be finishing that duology with the Crooked Kingdom. I'm not really happy about it, but consider me got. All right, next up we have the Stariel series by A.J. Lancaster, and this is just a cozy fantasy romance about a woman who inherits her magical estate, and the estate just happens to share a magical border with the fairy kingdom. And so when she inherits it, all sorts of things go wrong, and then fairies start coming back into the land, and there's a lot of questions why. And then she's got this romance with her childhood friend who is now like the steward of the estate, who is also a fairy, who's on the run from the king of fairies. And it's just got a lot of really great, like, just coziness in it that I really, really enjoyed. I really liked the first one. The second one I didn't like as much. That was one where I read it right after I finished the first one. I probably should have waited. Although I felt like as the series is progressing, it's getting farther away from the coziness that I enjoyed of the first one. But I like it enough that I'm going to finish it. It's a quartet. I finished the first two. I've got the second two on my list. I'm doing these on audio because I found them for free on the Audible app. So I'm doing it on audio. So that's the other reason it's taking me so long to get through them, is because I'm a very slow audio listener. It's just fun, cozy, fairy romance. All right, next up we have the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne, and this is a Viking-inspired epic fantasy told from different perspectives, and I really, really liked the first one. It took me a long time to get through, again, listening on audio. I felt that I cheated myself a little bit by doing it on audio, because I think I would have really enjoyed it a lot more if I had read it in text. But I really, really liked this book. I really liked how the threads were starting to come together at the end. I really, really liked the reveal of one of the characters at the very end. Still gets me. So I know that the second book is out. The third one has yet to come out, but it was just really good. It was a really good read, and I'm intrigued to see what happens next. All right, next up we have the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, and if you have watched my January TBR, you know that the third and final installment of this series is already on my TBR for this month, The Stone Sky. I really, really loved the first 2 books of this series. In fact, for a long time after I read the 5th season, I felt kind of depressed because it felt like there could not be a more perfect book, and that I would never write one that could even approach to being as beautiful and wonderful as that book was. But it also was like emotionally devastating in myriad ways that I can't even begin to talk about in a concise video like that I'm trying to make. But I loved it, and it destroyed me just a little bit. And it took me about 18 months to get to the second one, and that one was about 2 years ago that I read the second one. So it is time for me to get to the third one, finally finish it. I know it's going to completely lay me to waste, but I'm ready to finish it and and say goodbye. I don't know if I am, but I'm gonna. All right, next up we have the Daevabad Trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, aka Shannon Chakraborty, and I thought that City of Brass was middling. I really hated one of the 2 POV characters. I thought he was extremely bland. I thought his entire arc was very boring, and I wasn't looking forward to getting more of him in the second book, especially since it seemed like we were going to. And so I think I gave it 3 stars, and I was like, I don't need to read more of this. I've gotten what I need out of it. Then I read Amina al-Sirafi this year, and I loved it so much that it convinced me to take a second look at the Daevabad Trilogy. Now, this is one that I'm going to have to go back and reread the first one, City of Brass, before I move on, because I think I read this in 2018, and towards the end, as we were getting into the climax, I was just skimming it just so I could finish. I was just so over it. I wasn't really loving the direction that some of the characters had taken. That is one that I'm gonna have to go back and reread. I'll probably do that this year, probably early this year, so that maybe by the end of the year I'm ready to read the next one, which I think is City of Gold? Copper. City of Cop? No. Empire? Something. Something of copper and then something of gold. Kingdom. Kingdom of Copper, Empire of Gold. Pretty sure. All right, just 3 more left. Next up, we have the Farseer Trilogy, the first one being Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and this is, of course, a classic. Everybody knows at least about Robin Hobb, and it seems like you either really, really love the Assassin's Apprentice and this particular trilogy, or you find it really boring. And I loved it. I loved it so much. It was the kind of story that at the time I was convinced I wanted to write. I didn't mind the pace. I loved the character study, the emotional journey we go on with the main character. I just loved it so much. I think it took me like a week to read the first like 25%, and then I read the last 75% in 2 days. And then the version that I had illustrations in it. I don't know if this is true of all of them, but then there was this one illustration at the very end that made me cry so much. And I am not really a big crier when I read books, but that one just made me cry so much. I just loved it so much. So this is another one that I read a really long time ago, but I feel like the details have really stuck with me, so I don't think that I need to reread Assassin's Apprentice before I get into the next one, Royal Assassin. But yes, that is also on my list, and it's probably going to be done in the first half of this year. Next up is the Sandsea Trilogy by Chelsea Abdullah. The first one is The Stardust Thief, and this is my favorite book that I read last year. I loved it so much. I gave it 4.5 stars. This was everything I really wanted City of Brass to be honest with you. I love the characters. I love the journey. I love the camaraderie that they all develop. I love the setup for the next book. Yeah, I loved it so much. The only crime is that the next one isn't out yet. So, and I've seen varying dates of whether or when the Ashfire King is supposed to come out, and I don't know if any of them are official. I hope it's this year, and when it does come out, it will be it'll be instantly on my TBR. I'm not going to wait on it. I'm going to read it right away. And I may reread The Stardust Thief because I loved it that much. Alrighty, and the last one on my unfinished series list is the Tide Child Trilogy by R.J. Barker. The first book in this series is The Bone Ships, and I enjoyed it. There were times where I struggled with it, but this book had one of the greatest character reveals, in my opinion, that I've ever read. I don't want to spoil it, but it happens really, really early in the book, like in the first handful of pages. And even though I had so little context to go on, the reveal of this character took my breath away. And from that moment on, I was sold. This is a kind of piratey, seafaring nautical tale in a world that is an archipelago. There's just a lot of islands, and there are 2 main factions, and they have been at war since time immemorial. The ships that they make are made out of the bones of sea dragons, and the sea dragons have essentially gone extinct. And then one reappears, and it is a race to get this sea dragon to get the bones so that they continue making their bone ships and perpetuate this war. And I had such a good time with it, but I did find it to be kind of forgettable, which is why I haven't picked up the second one. To be honest with you, I only remembered that I read this as I was doing this list and making this audit. So I feel kind of bad, but I did really enjoy it. I guess I just wasn't compelled enough to pick up the second one. But with this year, with my commitment to reading more subsequent entries of series that I have already started, I am committed to picking the next one up and finishing the series as well. All right, and that is it. The entire list of unfinished series that I intend on reading. Probably not all of the books I haven't read that are on this list I will read this year, but I definitely plan on making a big dent in this list before the end of the year. I had mentioned in my New Year's reading resolutions videos that I want to continue a series at least once a month. So I think I'll probably do this audit every year going forward so that I can kind of keep track, because obviously as I'm reading, I'm starting new series, more and more new series. So this list will change and fluctuate, and I'm planning obviously on finishing at least one with the Broken Earth trilogy, but that is my plan. Now, that being said, there are series that I have started that I do not intend on finishing unless I am given some sort of reason to, or I'm just in a mood. I don't think that list is long enough for me to make an entire video about, and no one really wants to hear me talk about the series I'm not going to finish anyway. And that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite of these series are and which one I should prioritize finishing first. As always, if you like what I have to say and want to support my content, please like and subscribe below. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye.